speaking to realtors, I'm going to ask you to do three things. I'm not going to green shame you or anything. I'm not going to ask you for the numbers. But I want you to write down three numbers or add them up in your head. One is the amount annually that it costs to heat your home. So obviously, heating season, it's going to spike January, February. Write down in your head, rough idea of what that cost is annually. $2,000, $2,500, $3,000, $4,000, whatever it is. Now, a second number. Add up your total electricity bills for a year, right? So they may spike in the summer if you've got air conditioning, but get a rough average. Is it $150, $200 a month? Add that up so it's annual. Is that $1,800? Is it $2,400? Whatever it is, right? Now, the third number I'm going to ask you is kind of a weird one, but I'm in the real estate business. I have a Prius. I drive all over the place for showings, for teaching these classes. I know how many times I roll into the gas station, right? How many times do you roll into the gas station? Is it once a week? Is it 3 times every 2 weeks? What does it cost to fill your car? Do a rough number, add that up for a month, multiply it by 12. Now, what do those three numbers add up to? 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 bucks? A lot of money. This home in Salisbury, Massachusetts, you can see that there's a power plant on the rooftop, and it was built as a super insulated building as well. And they charged an electric vehicle. It was a net zero energy home. The load that was produced from the power plant on the rooftop exceeded the energy used for the home, but with the EV charging station, they paid a total of, for the whole cost for a whole year, all of their heating load, all of their cooling load, all of their appliances, and charging an EV vehicle for $434. How does that compare to your number, right? Is there a savings there of $5,000 annually? $6,000 annually. What does that mean? It means a lot to me. I've got a kid in college right now, right? It means a lot to my retirement account. It means a lot to my wife and I maybe being able to take a vacation, right? That's real money. It has value in the marketplace. And if you hire a realtor that gets it, that can support an appraiser that gets it, we can convey this value in the marketplace as well, right? So build it. They will come. We've seen it already. I work in the high-performance home space as a realtor with my team, the Rethink 39 group, are the Lair Realty partners. The 39 that we're rethinking is the 39% of U.S. energy consumption that's attributed to the built environment. And we feel very strongly, my partner Phil Massa is here, we lead the team, we feel very strongly that with every transaction that we're working on, we have an opportunity to bring that percentage down over time. I hope someday to still be called the Rethink 39 group when we can look back and say that 22% of U.S. energy consumption is attributed to the built environment, that we can move that number down, and we'll be a marker in sand in terms of 2019 when we started our real estate team. This class, actually, Selling the Sun, was created for Massachusetts realtors, and it was funded by Massachusetts Clean Energy Center to develop the program. It's a really popular class. It's really exciting to see how many residential real estate agents are showing up to the class. Now, that's partly because they're really afraid, right, of what solar PV means to the residential real estate transaction. They've heard issues with UCC-1s on third-party owned properties and how to deal with those. I think the funding that I know the funding that Mass CEC has provided has really been a benefit to the real estate community, and we're seeing more and more realtors kind of get the value of this. Take a look at, we're in a great state. I love the state of Massachusetts for a lot of different reasons, but the support, as Mike said in the beginning of the presentation, the general presentation, the support in Massachusetts is really pretty incredible to help move the high-performance home marketplace forward, to help move the solar PV marketplace forward as well, right? We've got a political will here. We've got leaders that get it, that support this, that want to be part of a solution to the climate. and energy challenges that are in front of us, and we know that 39% U.S. energy consumption is attributed to the built environment. We have a huge opportunity to be part of a solution. I feel so fortunate to be in a state with a political will that gets that opportunity. I deal with realtors on a national level that are unfortunately in states that don't have that same kind of support that we do, and it's really made a difference in the marketplace. Here's a good example. Back in 2005, there were 297 solar PV systems installed in the state, and when you aggregate the load together, it was 1.7 megawatts of capacity. Virtually nothing that was out there, right? When we aggregate load together, we're trying to get a sense of the larger picture of how solar PV actually contributes to the grid. So to put that 1.7 megawatts into perspective, when they closed down the nuclear power plant in Vernon, Vermont Yankee, that was a 600 megawatt power plant, just to put that number in perspective, okay? So barely enough to really touch any load. But here we jump forward to 2010. Now we have over 10 times the systems installed and over 25 times the number of megawatts that are installed. So what happened between 2005 and 2010? Green Communities Act was passed, right, in 2008, beginning of 2009, which helped move the net metering policy forward. And homeowners already were starting to realize the value of what net metering meant, what SREC 1 meant to them. We started to see more jobs come into the state because of these great programs that we had. And we had this huge goal that I think the state legislators felt like, well, this is a kind of ridiculous goal to get to 400 megawatts by the end of 2017, but it will keep all the greenies happy. It'll keep them off our backs, right? I don't think anybody ever expected we would move this quickly. By the end of 2017, 400 megawatts. We reached that goal by May 2013, right? So we're exceeding all of a sudden anybody's wildest expectations of how fast solar PV was going to happen in this state. At that point, we set a new goal to get to 1,600 megawatts of installed solar PV in the state by 2020. Now look at this, 400 megawatts, that's 2/3 of that Vermont Yankee power plant. Right now we're talking real load that's actually contributing to the grid. But we set another crazy goal to get to 1,600 megawatts by the end of 2020. By 2015, by the end of 2015, 43,000 homes in the state with solar PV on them, over 1,000 megawatts of energy. So we're moving quickly to that goal. It's expanding much faster than anyone ever expected. And of course, by the time we got to the end of August 2018, over 85,000 solar PV systems installed in the state, and you can still see that we killed that 1,600 megawatt goal. We're already at over 2,200 megawatts, with a new goal to get to an additional 1,600 megawatts with the new SMART program incentive. So this stuff is growing. Homeowners get it. You know, we're past the tree hugger phase of the market. Homeowners are just realizing that this is a smart economic investment to control their operating costs in a state which has really high electricity prices and very volatile prices as well, right? This is a way to control those costs, control your budget for your home. And if you care about a clean energy economy, which many of us in this room do, you know, we're also shifting towards that as well. So why is it growing so quickly? As I said, the price of power here in Massachusetts is high compared to US averages and compared to most states in the United States. And we've got a really volatile part of the marketplace. Travis, I'm going to get away from the mic. I'm sorry about this. But this was the end of 2014, 2015, when the two largest investor-owned utilities in the state increased the rates by 26 and 31% on residential ratepayers, right? So I'm coming back, you know, I'm flying. So that volatility is also a driver in homeowners making these investments. You know, it's high utility costs plus volatility in the marketplace makes it really, really hard to budget. this is, I mean, you know, homeowners, home buyers, homeowners feel this pain. If you've got a first-time home buyer that's been renting in a triple-decker in Allston, Brighton, they feel the cost of energy, believe me. If we can move them into homes with lower operating costs, particularly with how high the prices here in Massachusetts, buyers understand the value of that if we can communicate it to them appropriately, right? So there's a spec marketplace here for you guys to be able to take advantage of. This is an interesting graph for worldwide solar PV prices as they drop versus worldwide capacity. You can see there was a tipping point, a clear tipping point where solar PV was competitive in the marketplace, and we see the installation of solar PV worldwide spike up, right? We're at that place. We're beyond it, actually. We move forward. Strong policies and incentives are out there. I've already implied this, you know, and my feeling is if you're thinking about doing a spec development with host-owned solar PV, it's tempting, awfully tempting for you as the developer to take the 30% investment tax credit off from the solar PV system. I don't blame you for that. Obviously, we have a tax appetite. But if you allow the listing agent to market the home and for them to be able to take advantage of the 30% investment tax credit, you've really got a winning value proposition there, right? So that's always a conversation to have between listing agent, developer, that you're thinking about the right way to go. I can't blame you whichever way you want to go with this, but I'm just saying that that is a real value for potential buyers coming into the marketplace. What happens with the SRECs, with the old program, and now with the new SMART program? I really like the new SMART program because it's tariff-based incentive. So now, when we're listing homes under the SMART program, I'm going to have to do a 10-year analysis with the adder. Let's say it's a 4 or 5 cent adder for a residential home that's going to be additional on top of the current utility rate, which is this is based on, right? So I'll have to run an analysis for years 1 through 10, which will be a higher amount of income because it's a higher price that's being charged by the utility company. And then I'll run a value from a year 11 through 25 at the rate that ratepayer is paying right now, which is like 24.5 cents per kilowatt hour, right? In Massachusetts, because the rates are so high and the installed price of solar PV is so low, you're still making money on this even if you don't take advantage. As a developer, you're still making money on this even if you don't take advantage of the SRECs or the SMART program, or you won't be able to take advantage of the SMART program because it will roll with the homeowner. But traditionally, the SRECs program or the federal investment tax credit, you're still making money because the installed price is less than what pops out on this sheet that we upload into the MLS and communicate to the buyer, their agent, and the appraiser about the value. So you're getting a value add that's huge for the buyer, and you're still going to make a portion of money off from the installed price per watt. It's a win-win situation. And building codes are obviously driving this. It's probably why a lot of you are here. You know, Massachusetts has adopted what was the most rigorous building code in the country with IACC 2015. I think we're moving forward with IACC 2018 pretty quickly here. And on top of that, 251 of our 351 communities have voluntarily adopted a stretch code, which is 20% more rigorous than the building code that's out there. So builders are being dragged along, sometimes kicking and screaming, into delivering high-performance building envelopes, right? And many of you out there that are kind of thought leaders in this space are saying, you know what, let's build beyond code. We know that there is probably, you know, in the not too distant future, a net zero energy stretch code coming down the line, right? We know that the state of California, beginning in January, requiring that all new construction have solar PV, and with their building code, they're essentially requiring a net zero energy new construction phase. And we're seeing production builders like Meritage Homes move to building net zero energy. In my mind, if you're a buyer working with me and you're looking for new construction, I would have to say to you at some point in our conversation, why would you ever consider buying a code-built home at this point? When the ability to build net zero homes is, I mean, it's so there, it's in front of us. We just need to get more of the building community aware, which is why I'm so happy about this event, what you're doing here to bring more builders to this. You know, we're moving towards this. Let's build way above code. You know, those homes in Fort Hill, like I said, were beyond net zero. They were energy positive. Her scores in the negative numbers, -14 to -22. And buyers were looking at that and really engaged on the topic. They wanted to purchase the system. We sold all 4 of our homes, like I said, quicker than 2 of the 7 homes down the street that was built to code were purchased at a much higher price per square foot. Environmental concerns. So this is, we're seeing more and more research on this. This is from Pew Research Center, but we're also seeing this with the National Association of Realtors polling that we do as well, that buyers, home buyers, you know, any consumer in the United States is much more aware of their own environmental footprint, thank God, than they ever have been before, and are willing to put their money where their mouth is in purchases, right? Shelton Group says 74% of US consumers are making purchasing decisions based on the company's environmental reputation. I work for Lair Realty Partners. We're taking that very seriously. We're you know, they hired me as a chief sustainability officer. We may think that that's the first in the United States for a residential real estate company to do. But part of our marketing, our engagement, not only with our agents, but with our customers, both potential and current, is really to make sure that they understand we have a deep commitment to being part of a solution. That's a value add, and there's no question about it. And it's happening in the marketplace. We're seeing this happen all over the place. We're seeing demand in the marketplace out there, right? This is Accenture, 55% of millennials are thinking about putting solar PV on their home in the next 5 years, right? The challenge is we've just got to get millennials buying homes. That's the start. Once we get that, we can get to the 5 years, right? Now, that's over half the number of people, or twice as many as people my age, but if people my age, 28% are thinking about putting solar PV on homes, just like I'm doing with my house in Jaffrey, New Hampshire, that is pretty compelling numbers in and of itself, right? I mean, the value add is there. We're seeing it. There's no question about it. This is information from National Association of Realtors. When we asked them nationally, this was a random study, they said that in 80% of the marketplace, they were seeing solar PV out there. They said 39% said properties with solar panels increased value. That is true when? When it's host-owned, right? Because we can add the contributory value, so that's correct. 32% said it had no effect on value. That's true also when? When it's leased, when it's third-party owned, right? Because we can't add any contributory value to that. 11% said it decreased value. We have no evidence of this. Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratories has done a pretty rigorous study to show that there was no effect, even in the third-party owned marketplace, that solar panels decreased value. Now, you may run into a place when I ask this question to realtors, and a lot of times they'll say, well, it's ugly on the rooftop, right? You know, I missed the real estate class, I guess, where asphalt shingles add aesthetic value to a home. I look at solar PV panels, and I think they're the sexiest thing on the face of the earth, right? So beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and people's viewpoints on this are changing. 19% were honest and said that they don't know. But you can see that there are different ways where we have to think about this in terms of listing homes with this technology on them. And we're seeing that companies are really investing money for a reason. They're creating algorithms like Zillow's Sun Number, right? So you can go on Zillow and check and see if a potential home that you're buying has solar PV potential. As real estate agents, we hate Zillow. It's really terrible. So go instead to Google Project Sunroof, which is a much, much better tool, I think. Does the same kind of thing. So the market's responding. I mean, these two companies are spending money to develop algorithms for a reason, because people are going to their website and hitting on it. They're interested in it, right? If I see a buyer standing out in front of a home and doing this with their back to the rooftop, what are they looking at? Their compass, right? I mean, they're looking to see what direction the rooftop is facing to see what the solar PV potential of the home is, you know, so they can run that into Project Sunroof or run the analysis. And then there's Energy Sage, a great company here in Boston. I get asked the question a lot from our past home buyers that are thinking about putting PV on their rooftop. What supplier should I use? What PV installer should I use? That's a really scary question for a realtor that can end us up in real estate jail pretty quickly. So I send them to Energy Sage, where you can get 4 or 5 competitive bids once you plug your address in for solar PV installations. I love that site. Lawrence Berkeley National Lab did a pretty rigorous analysis on solar PV adding home value to property. We've got that generic number. I'd say be careful with the generic numbers. A lot of times we'll hear, for instance, the study that they did in California, it added $5,900 per kilowatt installed for existing homes. That's great to get that information out there, right? But when we're looking at the real appraisal report and the real estate transaction, stay away from generic numbers, and you'll use the tools that are utilized in the industry to get accurate value. You can see down to the pennies here, and that includes the cost of solar PV in the particular area that the buyer's looking at. Customers, again, are really interested in this stuff. This is a development that was down the street, actually, from the one that I sold on Highland Street in Fort Hill. You can see that they have solar thermal panels as well as solar PV panels on that rooftop. When those units were being sold, they were doing the open wall tour before anything was actually finished in the unit, and they sold several of the units then. Those units went up in 2013 when the market was starting to turn a little bit. So again, we're seeing that buyers are responding. There's just absolutely no question that they get what's going on here. So coordinating with the design team, I think that this is really, really important. Get your realtor involved. As you know, for LEED, there's the integrated design process, right? Get your realtor involved in that process from the very, very beginning. I'll show you an outcome of what the LEED integrated design process led to in terms of our marketing for the Weston project, right? So that was kind of a LEED integrated design process on steroids. There were 4 of us, the developer, the builder, myself, and the architect, that were involved with every decision for the 2.5 years we've been working on the project in Weston. And one point, coming out of the trailer in the middle of the winter, the construction trailer, the architect, who's brilliant, was going on and on in the meeting about the home as a machine. And we've got to think about homes differently. He's a really brilliant guy, very lofty in his thoughts. And the builder and I were walking out of the trailer, and he said, you know, what Treff said's pretty interesting. Maybe we should look at marketing that looks at high-performance automobiles as a marketing piece. And I thought, that's pretty cool. That's a great idea. So I started to go to high-performance automobiles to see how they were being promoted, right? And traditionally, when you see real estate marketing, it's in portrait rather than landscape, right? And I noticed that with high-performance automobiles, that was always the way it was set up, partly because of the shape of the car, right? But I decided to go with that. What I learned as I looked through that marketing was the marketing materials were always about the experience of driving the car, this really cool car. So we started to use that in the marketing of the home, the experience of living in this home. This was one of my favorite pics that we pulled up. It's a mom feeding her child, And in the little caption, it says, the air a child breathes is as important as what they eat. You know, so the experience of trying to convey the experience of living in a high-performance home to buyers. You know, they can come to the home, I can talk to them till I'm blue in the face about sustainability, this, that, and the other thing. But to have a packet that they can take home with them and look at the stuff in their own time and place, we found has been really valuable in the marketing of this home. So that came out of the integrated design process. Having the realtor involved from the very, very beginning so that we can give feedback about what buyers want, and we can learn about high-performance home buildings are really great. I mean, typically, if you hire a realtor at the end for a spec project, because you've seen their signs all over the place, they're going to get the inevitable question from a buyer, why did the developer make this choice, right? And if you're in the place where you were hired at the very end of the project, you tend to say, yeah, I don't know, you're right. Whereas if you're a realtor that's been part of the integrated design process from the very beginning, now I can say, you know, that's a great question. There was a lot of thought behind that decision, and I can explain why we made that decision as a design team. It's a much, much better way to connect to potential home buyers that are out there in terms of these projects. Bring them on from the beginning. Just like, and I agree with this absolutely, a good HERS rater, a good solar installer as part of the project from the very beginning is great, particularly if you're new to this, right? Getting an excellent HERS rater that has experience in high-performance homes and building envelopes, they can really help you make the development be that much more cost-efficient in terms of the build-out of it. Understand the solar opportunity at the design stage, you know, having this discussion about whether we want to convey the host-owned solar PV to the buyers or whether the developer wants to hold on to the investment tax credits and offer it as a third-party ownership option, really, really important. Everybody's got to be on the same page with that. Understand the load requirements at the design stage. You know, the manual J's are really critical with this, obviously. You know, we're seeing that with high-performance home projects that I'm selling, we want to at least make the garages EV ready. We want to have it wired so that if somebody comes in with a Tesla, we can hook that up immediately, right? So that's another important piece of this high-performance home marketing, right, that's out there. Optimized design to leverage solar PV opportunity. I think we've got a good sense of that. We've talked about that pretty clearly, right? In terms of the benefits, you know, there are clearly benefits of going both ways with this, but I'm a strong believer, because I've seen it in experience, that when homeowners realize the benefits of owning the solar PV, it's a no-brainer for them. It's a real marketing edge from my perspective in terms of the organic conversation that rolls out between the buyer and what we're doing. Solar ready is great. Like I said, it should be the minimum that builders are doing at this point, and I think it will be the minimum that builders will have to do in the code as it continues to roll out. Thank goodness for it. But we don't see any contributory value in the appraisal report for solar ready, but please do wire your home so that you get it done. Again, you know, there is real value to putting the system on the rooftops. You can make money off it, and it's a real value add. It's a real value proposition for the realtor selling it. Your realtor should leverage this when selling the home. Absolutely. If I know it's a solar ready home, that's a real help. If you've aligned this so that we've got a south-facing roof, or, you know, and we can really take advantage of solar PV, we want to actually absolutely be able to leverage that. In our MLS, this is another important piece of this. There are 600 MLSs across the United States. When we say multiple listing service, we tend to think it's one thing in the United States. Nothing could be further from the truth. We have 600 MLSs all over the United States. Some of them have a really good set of green data fields for the listing agent to be able to highlight those features in the home. Some of them have really terrible sets of green data fields. That's something the National Association of Realtors is working on to make sure we get an accurate set of green data fields throughout the United States. I can say honestly, with MLS PIN, the largest MLS here in Massachusetts, we have an excellent, rigorous set of green data fields. We have 80 green data fields in MLS PIN. We have to make sure the listing agents, though, are confident that they know what those fields mean and aren't afraid to fill them out, which is another issue in terms of the valuation prospect as well. So we've got to get listing agents to understand what the fields mean and actually be able to check the boxes and fill them out. Basics of marketing a solar PV home. I agree with this completely. Solar speaks for the home. It's visible, it's there, everybody's going to be asking questions about it. And for the developer doing spec stuff, same thing. This is the trigger in the conversation for even the energy efficient, the super tight building envelopes, the air sealing, the insulation works for these super insulated buildings. This is the trigger that allows me to be able to talk about all of the sustainable features in the development that they might not recognize, right? They might recognize that the walls are a little thicker. It's double stud walls, but they won't really ask any questions about that. This, they will ask questions about, and it allows a much more full conversation about the building envelope and the other high performance features in the home. So we have just to let you know what's going on at the upper levels of the Real Estate Trade Organization to help you understand that there really is a lot of work going on here to make sure we get the high performance home features and characteristics done correctly. This is one of the drivers of this. RESO, the Real Estate Standards Organization. So I just told you there were 600 MLSs in the United States. 3 years ago, there were 850. There's huge consolidation going on in the industry because of this organization is standardizing all of the fields. And they have a green data field set that's excellent, that's standardized, that can be delivered to MLSs across the United States. That's another point that National Association of Realtors is really trying to work on and make sure that we get these fulfilled throughout the United States, because we're seeing high performance homes end up in all markets, no matter what the political will is. But certainly here in Massachusetts, we're lucky to be leaders. This is another cool project that deals with one of the problems that I just talked about, right? Listing agents being afraid to fill in the green data fields, right? Or fill them in inaccurately, right? We see this all the time. So a lot of times if we don't know the taxes on a home, we might put in 9999 or 0000. Think about that now. We have a HERS index score box, right? And if the default is for the realtor to put in 0 for fields that they have no clue about, you can see the potential litigation nightmare that could be unfolding with that, right? So the U.S. Department of Energy is very engaged on this topic. They want to make sure the correct information is getting into MLSs across the country. One of the projects that they funded is through Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships, which you've heard about in other presentations. They're one of the people that are supporting this event today. And it's a project called HELIX. It stands for Home Energy Labeling Information Exchange. This is a database where we're collecting data from New York up to Maine of all the high performance home attributes. And we're in the process right now of engaging the MLSs from New York up to Maine to be able to auto-populate those fields into the RESO data fields if they've adopted them. So if I have a home at 123 Main Street in Melrose and it's got a 5.6 kW solar PV system and it has an Energy Star certification from 2003 when it was built, that information would auto-populate through an API when I write in 123 Main Street, Melrose into our MLS. That's really critical that we start to see these fields emerge. You know, I think the right thing to do is to train more and more agents, but you know, we only have so much scalability with that. This is a real cool way to deal with a huge challenge in the marketplace with listing agents that aren't knowledgeable and competent in this part of the marketplace. Any questions about that? So realtor credentials matter in this case, absolutely. And here's 3 or 4 different sets of credentials. As I said, the NAR Green designation is the one that my trade organization, the National Association of Realtors, sponsors. Only 0.5% of all realtors in the United States have this designation. It is the fastest growing designation at National Association of Realtors right now for good reason, right? But if you're hiring a broker to list a high performance home, ask them if they have their NAR green designation or if they're Echo Broker certified. I've never gone through that process. It's out of NAR's category, and I support our trade organization, but that's another rigorous designation. Or, I'm a LEED Green Associate as well because I sell a lot of LEED certified homes. Or, of course, if they've taken the next step and become a LEED accredited professional, those would all be things that if I were the broker owner and listing agents were listing high performance homes, I'd feel really uncomfortable as the broker owner who's responsible for all their screw ups, right, in my E&O policy. I wouldn't feel comfortable letting my listing agents list a home unless they had some kind of qualification, some kind of knowledge and competence behind them to list those homes. And I ask you, if you're developing these homes and they're spec homes or you're existing homeowners doing this kind of work, make sure that they've got some of these credentials where you can feel more confident that they have the knowledge and competence in this part of the marketplace. Work with a realtor that knows how to market solar. Like I said, it's not unusual if you ask your average realtor right now, what's the value of solar PV on my home? The tendency is going to be to get an eye roll, right? Just like the tendency would have been to get an eye roll from the HVAC installer that didn't know how to right size homes with super insulated buildings, right? That doesn't mean that they're not real estate professionals or they're good. It just means that they're not educated in this part of the marketplace and they're reacting emotionally to a really tough question that they have no idea how to answer, right? And thank goodness for Mass CEC, we're trying to get the word out more and more with Massachusetts real estate agents throughout the Northeast about this process of valuing these homes appropriately and marketing them appropriately. This is the tool, the PV Value tool. Right? If you go to pvvalue.com, it's free to use. At some point at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, the company that owns this is a company in Tampa Bay, Florida called Energy Sense Finance. When you go to PV Value tool, it's going to turn into the EI Value tool, and it's going to be able to let us use an income approach for things like geothermal, for heat pump technology, right? Stuff that we can't do. We're only able to do this with the PV Value tool. It's a great company. It's a really great tool. I'm really excited to see this in the real estate industry, to see how this rolls out. These are the inputs for the PV Value tool, how you need to calculate that specific number. And then the output, you have a handout for what that actually looks like. So we can see that in the MLS. It has all of our inputs that are up there, so we're transparent to the appraiser because they could change it if they don't like my inputs, right? If I'm selling an existing home that the homeowners own the system for 3 years, you're going to see 0 value for years 1 through 3, and then value for 4 through 25. Why would there be 0 value for years 1 through 3? Anybody want to take a guess? Because that's the value the sellers realized. They've captured that value. We're selling the home at year 4, so it's appropriate to add the value from year 4 through 25. Solar shouldn't, this is all from Energy Sage, great website, so much good information on this website, it's unbelievable. Get this question a lot from real estate agents, well, isn't it going to add an additional rider onto my insurance policy? Typically that's not the case, but as part of our due diligence, if I'm representing a buyer that's buying a home with solar PV, that's definitely a question I want my buyer to ask their insurance agent about, if there's going to be an additional rider. Typically not. There's also, I just want to highlight this for a second, Pearl certification. You know, we've talked about LEED certification, Passive House certification, National Green Building Standard certification, all of those realize value, and we all know that those are pretty rigorous certifications to go through. This is a great little company, Pearl Certification, that's just coming into the Northeast right now. So if you've gone through the Mass Save program and you've done air sealing and insulation work and you put in a heat pump in your existing home, you're not going to get a LEED certification for that costs 10 grand to do, right? This company, Pearl Certification, has created a really nice, rigorous third-party certification for existing homes in the state that have done that kind of work and can give them kind of the same type of certification that you might realize out of Pearl. This is new to market. Pay attention to this. Keep your eyes and ears open about Pearl Certification. If you need more information about that, I'd be glad to talk to you about it. So the first thing in terms of valuation that we need to understand, right? There's a buyer that could potentially be buying your home at some point and is going to wonder about how that lease or power purchase agreement works, right? So that's one focus in terms of the valuation process, right? Then the second step is that moves on once the home is under agreement. If they need a loan, the bank, the lender is going to bring an appraiser by the property. Right? So we've got two different modes of valuation, what the buyer perceives and then what the appraiser will write down and send forth to the underwriter. And the underwriter's job is to protect the stakeholders, the shareholders of the bank, right? So there's kind of two different tacks that are there. One of the pieces that we know though, so Fannie Mae, you've probably heard of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, right? They're the secondary mortgage market and they really set the guidance for lenders down the line. One of the things that they're very clear about with third-party owned solar PV, which is about 60% of the 85,000 systems that are on rooftops in Massachusetts right now, right? They say that if it's a third-party owned system, then it's personal property. Even though for the host-owned property, for the homeowner that's bought the system outright, put on the roof or the land the same way, when it's host-owned, it's real property. What's the difference between the two? In the appraisal report, the appraiser can't give any contributory value for the third-party owned system because it's personal property. For the real property, they have to appropriately value it, and we have a way that that gets done. In fact, that's in your handouts. So unfortunately, with third-party owned systems, we can't add any contributory value. Now that doesn't mean the buyer, if it's a good lease or a good power purchase agreement, where they're paying 50% of what they'd be paying Eversource or National Grid for the same amount of power and it's coming from clean power, if that's expressed to the buyers and they understand that, they may see value in that, absolutely, right? But we can't add it to the appraisal report. So that's a great question. Third-party owned versus host-owned is really a critical factor in this. We're doing that with a project that I have in Weston, Massachusetts right now, where we're transferring, and we did this with the systems in Fort Hill as well, where the seller sells to the buyer the solar PV system so that they can take the ITC with their next year's tax, their next year's taxes. We also know, right, just so we're 100% aware of this, that the 30% investment tax credit moves down to 26% in January and then down to 22% in 2021. If Congress does nothing, that will expire. So just be aware of that as we continue the discussion with investment tax credits as well. It's a great question. It's not difficult. It can be done. We've done it in multiple projects at this point. I mean, the trickier part is, like, for instance, with the legacy SREC program, right? The nuances of transferring or not transferring those to the new home buyer, right? So let's say you own a solar PV system that you installed 3 years ago, and there's 7 years left of those SREC credits, which are pretty valuable. You know, I mean, if your 5 kilowatt system is producing 6 of those annually, the floor price right now is like $200 per SREC, and last year they were going for $400. So you got a check from the utility company last year that divided it, quarterly, but it added up to about $2,000, $2,400. That's an immense amount of value as we move forward, right? So if you're dealing with a listing agent that gets this kind of stuff, how do we start to think about that? Well, let's say you've got a boiler that's near the end of its life and you have a home inspector comes in, right? Maybe we transfer those SRECs to the new buyer to make them whole for the investment that they're going to make in the new boiler that they're going to put in, right? Or maybe there's an arrangement that you make with your SREC company. There's also a document to be able to hold on to those SRECs as well as you move to your new address. But all of that needs to be really spelled out before we get to a purchase and sales agreement in the transference of the property. These are really important questions, really important kind of subtleties in how we leverage your ownership of those SRECs as you move forward. Well, first of all, at a minimum, we should be building to solar ready, right? So homeowners can put it in there. There's no contributory value for solar ready homes, unfortunately, right? That wouldn't be realized in the appraisal report. Perhaps a buyer would see that there's value to that, but that's a minimum that we should be doing. There's no question about it. As a realtor, knowing what I know, knowing the value add that's out there and how hot the market is right now, I would certainly recommend to that developer that she install the solar PV and we pass the ownership on to the buyers. She's going to make money because of the low price of solar PV, the installed price per watt right now, which is certainly less than $4 per watt installed, it seems like by many of the installers that I'm seeing out there. And the fact that solar PV prices are so high, they're going to be making money if we do this correctly with the contributory value that would be added to the listing price and the selling price of the home. It's a huge benefit when I'm engaging with a buyer, right? Now, look, real estate agents could get away with not knowing anything about energy efficiency for a long, long time because it's behind the walls, it's invisible. One of the cool things about solar PV is it's visible, which is why it's making real estate agents really nervous about what this means in the real estate transaction, and that's why our classes are filling up for selling the sun as well, right? Whereas the energy efficiency classes that I did or the high performance building classes that I did would get half the number of students to those classes. Solar PV is visible. I love that for a developer in a high performance development because that allows me, there's going to be questions that come from the buyer about how that system works, and they may look at the ERV or the mini split system and just have no questions about the value of that in the marketplace. But with solar PV, they're going to be asking me questions about how it runs, and it allows for an organic conversation to come up with the buyers about what sustainable development means in ways that don't happen with solar ready homes or homes without solar PV. So my feeling is add the solar PV, absolutely. And offer it as a benefit for the homeowner with the 30% investment tax credit and the new SMART program additional contributory value as well. We need leaders like you to experiment with this, Kristen, right? Because I don't know how the residential rental market responds to this, but I can't wait to hear the outcome. I have to think, given what I know, the way buyers are responding to this, they're going to respond very, very favorably to zero operating costs or near zero operating costs on their home. I mean, it just, you know, conveying that value to the potential home buyer, you know, is really critical in terms of how you do that, how you market it. But I have to assume, given what I know, that they're going to respond favorably. Yep, so I have the appraisal report in my computer. The appraiser added $37,000 worth of contributory value for the solar PV. They gave a credit of $20,000 for that unit for the LEED Platinum certification. Now, this home in Weston, we haven't sold it yet. It's listed at $4.85 million, so it's a high-performance luxury product, right? And we did the appraisal because we knew that the buyer's agents in Weston were not going to be up to date on what's going on. So we did the appraisal. It came in at $5 million, and we got a $120,000 credit for the LEED Platinum certification that we got with an appraiser that's gone through the Valuation of Sustainable Buildings program. We added $70,000 for that system. It's a 14.6 kW solar PV system. for contributory value for that home as well. So those are two specific examples where we're seeing valuation really making a difference. HERS scores, you know, when we get these lows, even this 7,600 square foot home in Weston has a HERS score of 19. We got contributory value for that. The HERS scores of -14 to -22 were really great from the appraiser's perspective in terms of making that argument to the underwriter. All right, Travis, you want to take it over?
Sure, yeah, we'll wrap it up here. Thank you very much, Craig. I
Yeah, no
appreciate
problem.
it.